Have you ever looked at like a really big challenge, a policy that seems totally set in stone and just wondered how one person could possibly make a difference? Like what does it actually take? What kind of audacity maybe for someone to not just challenge things but actually succeed in changing how society works? It's pretty fascinating when you think about it. Today we're diving deep into exactly that kind of story. It's the extraordinary journey of Marc Emery, famously known as the Prince of Pot.
Hmm.
And this isn't just about rebellion, right? It's really about how his relentless civil disobedience, plus this really sharp business sense, transformed Canada, took it from strict cannabis prohibition to, well, reform. Prince of Pot, it wasn't just a catchy name. He earned it by, openly breaking laws, building this global cannabis seed empire, and really questioning the whole idea of illegality. So our mission today, using these really interesting excerpts from Marc Emery, Prince of Pot, A Legacy of Defiance from Nug Notes, is to trace how he did it, the key moments that made him such a central figure in the whole cannabis movement. And I have to say, digging into this material, what struck me was just how everything he did connected. It really shows the power, almost unbelievable power, of just one determined voice to create these huge ripples, a masterclass, really, in how conviction can drive change. Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's rewind a bit, way back before Marc Emery was, the cannabis guy. The Nug Notes piece starts us in London, Ontario. Born in 58. And even as a teenager, you see these flashes, right? This entrepreneurial thing. He was flipping stamps for profit, already had a knack for seeing value. But then, owning City Light's bookshop in his early 20s, that's where it starts getting really interesting. Kind of foreshadows things. Because it wasn't just any bookstore. Emery used it as a platform. Sold banned zines,
Yeah.
those underground mags, lots of libertarian stuff. And he seemed to really relish those early fights against censorship, even taking on things like Sunday shopping laws, often ended up in court for it.
Yeah, and what's crucial there, I think, is how these early interests, the business side, the sort of contrarian literature, challenging these maybe minor but restrictive laws, they weren't random. You can see how they kind of merge into this consistent, defiant character. It's like the groundwork for his later activism. Those early fights, they were basically training, weren't they? Taught him how to challenge authority, the power of being defiant in public, how to use the media, skills he definitely used later on a much bigger stage. It really shows this deep-seated pattern of questioning norms, right, from young age.
It's incredible, yeah, how that foundation was built. These early acts were just the start, though. By 1994, things really shift. He makes this big move to Vancouver, and the Nug Notes material talks about how a trip to the High Times Cup, that big cannabis festival, how that really lit the fuse for his activism. He comes back totally energized, and boom, opens Hemp BC. And this wasn't just like any old shop. It was Canada's first modern head shop, stocking grow books and critically cannabis seeds.
Right, and the timing there, opening Hemp BC at that specific moment, was just, well, it was strategically brilliant, like open defiance as normalization. He clearly understood that just advocating quietly wasn't going to cut it. By setting up a real storefront, something visible for something still illegal, he wasn't just giving people resources, he was forcing everyone, public and authorities, to confront it right there in the open. Hemp BC became this beacon, a place to talk, learn, get stuff. It really helped chip away at the stigma, made the whole movement harder to ignore. A bold move.
Totally. And he obviously realized pretty quickly that one shop, even a visible one, wasn't enough. To really fuel things, he needed more reach and, crucially, money, a sustainable engine. And that leads right into what Nug Notes calls the seed bank boom. Basically, 1995 to 2005, Emery Seeds becomes this huge mail-order seed bank, global scale. And here's where it gets, well, really wild and incredibly audacious. He openly paid taxes. Get this. Labeling himself a marijuana seed vendor on the official forms. Just think about that. Declaring income from something totally illegal. And the profits. We learned they didn't just go into his pocket. They fueled this massive effort across North America, legalization campaigns, rallies, those expensive court battles. And at the same time, he's building this media empire. Founds Cannabis, Canada Magazine, later Cannabis Culture, then launches Pot TV. And Pot TV wasn't just some small thing. It was like a broadcast hub for activists, growers, everyone, way before YouTube was a big deal. So he's basically creating the voice, the community, the political machine, and the funding all at once. It's this whole ecosystem for change.
That integration, the funding, media, activism, sounds incredibly effective. But what exactly made that ecosystem work so well? Were there risks in that model? Well, the brilliance is that symbiotic relationship, right? The seed bank makes the money. That money then gets plowed back into cannabis culture and pot TV, which do what? They amplify the message, educate people, organize the movement, and crucially, draw more attention back to the seed bank. It's this perfect feedback loop. And that move, paying taxes openly like that, it wasn't just defiance. It was a PR masterstroke. Got headlines, sparked debate, kind of legitimized him in the public eye, even if not legally. The vulnerability, of course, was being so out in the open, made him a huge target. But he clearly calculated that the impact of being transparent outweighed that risk.
Absolutely. That transparency was the defiance. Which brings us right to his method, this very direct confrontational approach. Nugnotes calls it civil disobedience politics. He didn't just talk about change, he actively forced the issue. So in 2000, he launches the BC Marijuana Party, gets 79 candidates running provincially. Now, the goal wasn't really winning seats, though I guess that would have been nice. It was about keeping prohibition in the headlines,
Yeah.
forcing it into mainstream politics. He staged rallies everywhere, famously passed joints right on police station steps, and just racked up arrest after arrest. Vancouver raids, smoke-ins across the country, just constant in-your-face challenges.
Yeah, and what's fascinating there is the strategy behind it. It wasn't just random law breaking. Emery was deliberately, almost surgically, using arrests, court cases, public stunts as tools to show how absurd and unfair he thought prohibition was. Each arrest, each court date, each rally, it wasn't just an event. It was a calculated media opportunity designed to highlight the human cost, get public sympathy, and force the legal system itself to grapple with the issue. He knew that personal costs could translate into political leverage, turning his legal problems into headlines that fueled the debate. It's kind of a classic case of using the system against itself, really.
And that approach, pushing so hard, inevitably led to this huge clash with the state, really unfolded between 2005 and 2010. The Nugnotes account talks about this major joint operation, U.S. DEA, Canadian police targeting him specifically for shipping seeds to the U.S. This wasn't some minor charge. The U.S. labeled him a major drug trafficker, which led to his extradition. He eventually pleads guilty in Seattle, serves 5 pretty tough years in U.S. federal prisons, a really stark example of the stakes involved. And when he finally got out in 2014, he came back to cheering crowds, a hero's welcome in Vancouver. His wife, Jody Emery, also an activist, had been fighting for him the whole time he was inside. That was a huge chapter, obviously, but still not the end of his story.
No, not at all. And connecting that to the bigger picture, the extradition and imprisonment really underscore a few key things. First, like you said, the incredibly high stakes and the cross-border reach of these drug laws. It showed his actions were being taken very seriously internationally, not just locally. Second, it was definitely a warning shot to others thinking of similar defiance. But paradoxically, for his supporters, it just cemented his image as a martyr for the cause. Probably galvanized the movement even more, fueled the outrage driving that push for legalization. It really put the global cannabis fight into sharp focus for Canadians.
Right, and you'd think, okay, 5 years in a U.S. federal prison? Yeah, maybe slow down now, but nope. His return to activism right after prison, 2014 to 2018, was just pure defiance. So what does this all mean? Well, the Nugnotes material shows he didn't waste a second. Immediately opens new cannabis culture shops across Canada before legalization even happened, basically daring authorities to raid them. We're talking prime spots, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. He kept getting arrested, pleading guilty to trafficking charges. But, as the source says, he spun the bus as protest fuel. Just masterfully turned every arrest into more media, another rallying cry, more proof of, the absurdity of keeping prohibition going, a real double down on his whole strategy.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How did that willingness, facing arrest again right after getting out, how did that actually contribute to the political pressure? Well, that post-prison defiance, opening those shops, getting busted again, it wasn't just rebellion. It was a very deliberate, very visible tactic. It highlighted the hypocrisy, the impracticality of keeping cannabis illegal when things were clearly moving towards change. Every bust was news, widely covered. It created this sense of urgency. He essentially forced politicians' hands, making it harder and harder to ignore the public demand and showing, look, you can't really suppress this anymore. His persistence definitely sped things up towards legalization.
That pressure clearly paid off. Canada legalizes adult recreational use in 2018. The legalization era begins. And post-legalization, Emery pivots again, moves into commentary, consulting on seeds. Even some alternative politics had a brief run with the PPC, the People's Party of Canada, which might seem surprising to some, but you could argue it fits with his long-term libertarian, anti-authoritarian kind of views. And even now, he's still touring, writing, attracting cameras. Nugnotes calls him part hero, part lightning rod, which feels pretty accurate, still very much out there making noise. But this period also brought new challenges. From 2019 on, he faced what the sources call controversy and response. Misconduct allegations surfaced, which led to him being removed from some events, quite a bit of backlash in the community and media. Now, it's important to state, as the sources do, no formal charges were filed. He denied any wrongdoing. But that scrutiny definitely affected his role, his visibility. It kind of forced this conversation about how activists and public figures are held accountable even after they achieve their main goal. It really highlights that the fight isn't just about laws, but also about navigating shifting social norms, personal conduct, especially when you're still under federal scrutiny.
Yeah, and what's fascinating there is seeing how figures like Emery navigate that change. When the main fight, legalization, is won, the whole landscape shifts. An activist's role often has to evolve, and
Right.
suddenly they face different challenges, not necessarily from the government, but from public perception, community standards, accountability in this new, more mainstream regulated world. It shows the complexities when a movement goes from defiance to acceptance. The very traits that made someone a powerful rebel might be seen differently later on. It's something a lot of long-term activists probably grapple with.
Marc Emery's journey, looking back through the Nug Notes material, it's just an incredible story. Stamp flipper to the Prince of Pot. His relentless defiance, that sharp business mind, it undeniably shifted Canada's whole view on cannabis. He was this force who really understood that sometimes, yeah, you have to break the rules to change them.
His legacy is huge, absolutely. Nugnotes sums it up powerfully. He, quote, turned seeds into war chests, books and broadcasts into movement lore, and arrest records into headlines that push Canada from prohibition to reform. He didn't just talk about it, he engineered change, proved that one determined voice, even willing to sacrifice freedom, could make a massive
Yeah,
difference.
truly monumental.
And so even as things settle down in Canada, Marc Emery is still, in many ways, the Prince of Pot. Which leaves us with a really interesting question for you, the listener. What does that title even mean now in a post-prohibition world? Especially for the guy who fought so hard to make it happen. How does the legacy of someone so defined by defiance continue to shape things, shape his own role, when the rules are different, and these new challenges around social norms and accountability pop up? Think about how courage can create new realities, but also how those new realities often bring their own unexpected complexities.